It was just after 2:17 in the morning on October 6, 1948, when Ashgabat, the capital of the Turkmen Soviet Socialist Republic, was struck by disaster. The city lay at the foot of the Kopet Dağ Mountains, quiet and fast asleep, its population of around 150,000, mostly resting in single-story homes made of unreinforced brick with heavy clay roofs. These structures were not built to withstand seismic activity, leaving the inhabitants extremely vulnerable. For nearly 20 years, the fault line beneath the city had been quiet, with only a minor quake in 1929 hinting at the danger. Suddenly, a low rumble from the mountains broke the silence, followed almost immediately by a violent jolt from the ground below. Two massive shocks occurred within seconds of each other, and the entire earthquake lasted only about 10 seconds. In that brief span, the city was virtually wiped off the map. Buildings crumbled, walls collapsed, and streets became piles of rubble, leaving survivors disoriented in the pitch-black night. Those few who managed to escape described a terrifying scene. Clouds of dust obscuring the stars, the sound of collapsing buildings mingling with screams for help, and an overwhelming sense that the city had been hit by a bomb rather than a natural disaster. Emergency response was nearly impossible in the darkness, and most people had no time to react. Within moments, Ashgabat had transformed from a bustling city to a landscape of chaos, marking the start of one of the deadliest earthquakes of the 20th century. The earthquake that struck Ashgabat was not a random event. It was the result of the region's dangerous geology. The city lies on the northern edge of the collision zone between the Arabian and Eurasian tectonic plates. This slow-motion continental collision created the towering Himalayas and continues to make the area highly prone to seismic activity. Stress along the fault lines in this region builds steadily over decades before being released in sudden, devastating earthquakes. On October 6, 1948, the earthquake reached a surface wave magnitude of 7.3. Its focus was shallow, only about 18 kilometers beneath the surface, which meant the energy was barely dissipated before reaching the city. The epicenter was extremely close, just 25 kilometers away, so the shaking Ashgabat experience was almost at its maximum possible intensity. Geologists now classify the fault involved as a strike-slip fault, where two tectonic blocks slide past each other horizontally, generating violent lateral ground movement. The modified Mercalli intensity scale rated the shaking as level 10, described as extreme. Unlike magnitude scales that measure an energy release, the Mercalli scale reflects the effects experienced by people and structures. For Ashgabat's unreinforced brick and adobe buildings, level 10 shaking was catastrophic. Walls cracked and roofs collapsed within seconds, leaving virtually no structure intact. Even public buildings and infrastructure, which might normally resist minor tremors, were destroyed. The combination of a shallow focus, high-intensity shaking, and extremely vulnerable construction made survival inside any building nearly impossible. When the shaking stopped, Ashgabat had been transformed into a landscape of rubble and ruin. Nearly every brick and adobe building lay in ruins, and entire neighborhoods had disappeared under collapsed walls and roofs. Hospitals were destroyed, leaving the injured with no access to medical care. The railway station was reduced to debris, and communication lines were severed, isolating survivors from the outside world. Heavy freight trains were tossed from their tracks, and the few underground water pipes that survived were critical for providing any water to the devastated population. The timing of the earthquake worsened its impact. Striking in the early hours of the morning meant most residents were asleep inside their fragile homes, instantly trapping them beneath collapsing structures. Emergency response was limited to the few who managed to survive and escape, and they quickly set up makeshift aid stations in public squares and open areas. Despite their efforts, the scale of human loss was staggering. For decades, the Soviet government deliberately underreported the death toll. Initial reports claimed only 10 to 20,000 fatalities, but later research revealed the actual number ranged from 70,000 to 110,000. This represented nearly 10% of the population of the Turkmen Soviet Socialist Republic at the time. Among the dead were many entire families, including relatives of young Sapir Murat Niyazov, who would later become the first president of an independent Turkmenistan. The sheer magnitude of destruction made it one of the deadliest earthquakes of the 20th century, a catastrophe hidden from the world for decades. The aftermath of the earthquake that should have sparked an immediate international response, but Ashgabat was behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union. In the climate of Joseph Stalin's rule, Admitting that a major Soviet city had been destroyed was seen as a political weakness that could not be acknowledged. Reporting on the catastrophe was tightly controlled, and the scale of the disaster was deliberately concealed from both domestic and foreign audiences. The day after the quake, the Soviet newspaper Pravda mentioned only that seismic activity had been detected in the region, offering no information about the destruction or the human toll. International press agencies, relying on Soviet sources, repeated the censored reports, leaving the world unaware of the true devastation. Even the aid that was sent from other parts of the Soviet Union was disorganized due to this enforced secrecy, slowing relief efforts for survivors. Thousands of critically injured people were left without proper medical attention, and it is estimated that nearly half of those suffering life-threatening wounds died in the days following the earthquake because of the lack of care. The policy of silence persisted for nearly 40 years, until the late 1980s, when the Soviet policy of glasnost allowed historians and researchers to access previously hidden archives. Only then did the full scale of the tragedy come to light. Approximately 110,000 people had perished. The deliberate suppression of information turned a natural disaster into a story of compounded tragedy, demonstrating the deadly consequences of political censorship in the wake of a crisis. In the immediate aftermath, recovery in Ashgabat was a massive and brutal undertaking. 4 divisions of the Soviet army were deployed to manage the chaos, clear debris, and provide aid to survivors. Establishing communication with other Soviet cities was a priority, and it took several days to restore radio contact to coordinate supplies and medical support. Despite the destruction, some services were restored relatively quickly. The railway line was operational again within 3 days, allowing essential goods to reach the city. Electricity returned in 6 days, though medical care remained improvised, taking place in open public spaces and parks since all hospitals had been destroyed. Makeshift shelters and aid stations became lifelines for the thousands who had lost their homes. Long-term rebuilding was slow and tightly controlled by the government, which continued to withhold the scale of the disaster from outsiders. Ashgabat remained closed to visitors for nearly 5 years, while the authorities directed reconstruction projects under strict secrecy. Propaganda highlighted the heroic rebuilding efforts without acknowledging the human tragedy that necessitated them. Over time, the city was transformed into what is now called the White Marble City, designed to be one of the most earthquake-resistant capitals in the region. October 6th is observed in Turkmenistan as Earthquake Memorial Day, a solemn reminder of the lives lost and the lessons learned. The 1948 earthquake remains a crucial study in seismic risk management, urban planning, and the enduring need for transparent disaster preparedness. It serves as a lasting testament to the human cost of both natural forces and political secrecy.